Welcome to Aspirations Over Hesitations, the podcast for high-achieving women whose ambitions are bigger than their fears. I'm your host, Alli Eldridge. As a mom, wife, and Fortune 500 company retiree, I know what it's like to wear many hats while still wanting more out of life. Whether it's stepping off the corporate ladder to lean into motherhood, healing yourself from chronic health issues to bring home that miracle baby, or launching your own business, you'll be inspired by stories of women who are going for the big things in life, in spite of anxiety that they too have experienced. Here, you'll find a community of moms who can relate to wanting what others say is impossible. They embrace alternative ways of thinking, working, and being, even when it comes with some uncertainty. One thing's for sure. If you want to live an unconventional, extraordinary life full of freedom and flexibility, you have to be willing to do things a little differently. Are you ready to say yes to choosing your aspirations over hesitations? Let's jump in. Hi, everyone. Today I am joined by Jillian Tate, a board-certified family nurse practitioner, wife, mom of 3, and the founder of the Rebel Institute of Health. She helps women get real answers to fatigue, hormone imbalances, gut issues, and stubborn weight without the guesswork or Band-Aid fixes. Jillian is bold. She's passionate about helping women reclaim their health by finding the root cause, and she provides care for men and children too. When I first heard Jillian talk about how she got into this space because of her husband's health, I was blown away. It is such a relatable story for those who have been failed by traditional healthcare and want more for their families. So I cannot wait for you all to hear her wisdom today. Welcome, Jillian.
Yeah, how are you today?
Great. Glad that it's back to school and just the fall season.
Yes.
So, Jillian, your husband was diagnosed with diabetes at a young age, and you dove into his case determined for answers. Can you give us the backstory on what you were doing before his diagnosis and then how that experience changed the trajectory of your career?
Yes. So back when this happened, I wasn't even a nurse yet. I was studying pre-medicine. I was a biochemistry and molecular biology major at Oklahoma State University. Me and my husband went to school there. So he's an Energizer bunny. Like he always has been, always will be. He's just always getting things done. And just all of a sudden, he was wanting to stay in bed and he wasn't feeling well. And it just continued to get worse and worse. He was drinking tons of fluids, and I kind of did a Google at that time. This was like back in 2007, so there weren't a lot of resources. And I was like, I think you're diabetic. And he was like, there is no way I'm diabetic. At this time, he was 21. And we were just typical college kids. We were not healthy by any means, but we were doing the same things that everybody else was doing. So he ended up passing out in his apartment one morning. And so he finally was like, okay, I'm going to go to the campus doctor. His blood sugar was tested there and it was like 900. And so they sent him over to the hospital. And it was a hospital in a college town, so it wasn't anything special. But they admitted him, they started him on an insulin drip, and then we were discharged like a day or two later. And they told him he had high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and was now diabetic. So they sent him home with insulin injections 4 times a day and a blood pressure medication and a statin for his cholesterol. And he just thought that this was the new way of life. We didn't get any diet teaching other than the fact that one unit of insulin was 15 carbs. So he needed to try to keep track of carbs. And, you know, as a 21-year-old college student, I knew from nutrition classes what a carb was, but still you're not used to counting things. Well, I think things are different now. I think we're more educated and more aware, but back then that was not the norm to care about those things. So that's what we did. And that's what we did for 3 years. And We went to numerous doctors, and I was asking questions because I just being science minded, I was wanting to know more. And so I was like, hey, we were told also that I'm an awful storyteller, by the way, so I'm going to have to backtrack a lot, but we were told
You're
that
great.
he was one diabetic because he was so young and this happened out of nowhere that it was type 1 diabetes. He was going to have to be on insulin. No ifs, ands, or buts. So I started asking questions at the endocrinologist if they had tested his insulin levels and if they had tested his antibodies. And I was told no. So they just made this diagnosis without any of the information that they needed to make this diagnosis. And so that doctor, after I hounded, he actually yelled at me because I was asking questions and I was answering to him. And he was like, are you the patient or is he the patient? So he was very
Doctors get so mad about the wife energy.
Yes. And so he did agree to run those labs, and we found out that he had high insulin levels and no antibodies. So he was not a type 1 diabetic. He was type 2 diabetic. But they also refused to tell him that. And I think that's kind of what he needed to hear to take accountability for what was going on with him. This was type 2. This was more than likely lifestyle induced. Like, yeah, you've probably got some bad genetics, and that made you more prone to developing this so early. But they're like, well, you're type 1.5.
What?
So he would just cling to that. And instead of just doing what he needed to do, he was like, well, I can't control it. I'm type 1.5. And I'm like, there's no such thing. You either have insulin or you don't. So that led me down the path of, and this was kind of whenever I was I just started nursing school. And I've always been anti-medicine, which is funny because I'm a nurse practitioner, but that's just naturally never been the way that I've gone. And so I was like, there has to be more to this. So I started doing research, and I found some information about a diet where you would cut out carbohydrates. So essentially it was ketogenic before ketogenic was really popular. And so I was like, we're going to try this on you and see if it works. And he was like, fine, whatever, I'll do one of your crazy ideas. And so he essentially did like a clean ketogenic diet, really for a couple of years. And he reversed his diabetes. He got off of his blood pressure medication, and he brought his lipid levels down to a normal level. With that said, he is now on no medication, and he was diagnosed in 2007. This is 2025 now. On no medication, he has normal levels with his blood work now. He doesn't eat ketogenic anymore, but we've implemented other lifestyle changes that I've learned throughout the years. And it just scares me to think about where we would be if he had stayed on the insulin, because he would have become resistant to that insulin that we were giving him as well. And he probably would have added a bunch of new blood pressure medications and new lipid level medications and who knows what else. Like his kidneys could be shot by now, and he'd be on dialysis. Like, we don't know.
Yeah.
And just knowing how differently his life would have gone if he would have just been like, yes, sir, and followed all of that medical advice. Well, actually, he probably would have if I had done that. Our lives would look very different, and our children's lives would look very different right now. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and all of those medications like come with hefty side effects too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And he was having a lot of side effects. He wasn't the same person. His personality was different. He was just shorter and more irritable. He was tired all the time, which wasn't him. So they definitely, there's side effects on the body, but just outward, he was having side effects as well, just from feeling bad all the time.
Yeah. And you said when they discovered this, his blood sugar was 900?
Yes, it was. His A1C, I don't even remember what it was. It was like 14 or 15, something really high. So it had been going on for a little while. He essentially went into what we call DKA, or diabetic ketoacidosis. And so it was like more of an acute crisis point at that time, but he had probably been dealing with it for quite some time.
Wow. That's insane. And you mentioned, like, as a nurse, you obviously went to nursing school, kind of that traditional healthcare path in terms of education. What have you observed, other than your own personal circumstance that you just described, that gets you just really fired up about today's standard of care?
Oh, man, that is a loaded question. I think just the inability to stray from the traditional and the norm. And a lot of that is due to regulations with laws and insurance companies. But then some of it too is just lack of desire to get new education, because we're taught this traditional way. Everything's in an algorithm. If this happens and you give this med, and then you escalate it by this much, and then you add this medication, and everything is just so not thought based. It's just checking boxes and following rules. And I think that is the most frustrating thing, is that people get too caught up in the rules, because we don't want to get sued. We don't want to get insurance companies mad and they won't reimburse you. But it makes the thinking go away, and it makes listening to the patient go away, because they already have this preconceived idea of what they're going to do and how they're going to treat them.
Well, yeah. And the thinking outside of the box piece is huge. I know a friend and her sister was dealing with like some really serious health issues, and she was getting so frustrated at like the hospital where she was at. And she was like, can someone just think outside of the box here, like on this case?
Yeah, absolutely. I see that a lot. I saw that in the hospital. I saw that in primary care as a provider. I saw it on the floors whenever I was just an ICU nurse. So yeah, I think it's a really big problem in healthcare.
So what did your career path look like after you were done with nursing school from that point to where you are now?
I finished nursing school and went directly into the ICU. And so I was in a mixed ICU. I also did a medical ICU. I did cardiovascular ICU. So I saw lots of chronic health issues. There were traumas for sure, but lots of chronic health issues that were leading people to that point. Diabetes that was untreated, sepsis from infected diabetic ulcers, heart attacks, things of that nature. So I spent a long time in the ICU. And then from the ICU, I went and worked in lifestyle medicine. I was the manager of a lifestyle medicine center. And we did some amazing things. We were working with patients that had been diagnosed with diabetes and heart disease. We did cardiac rehab and a diabetes reversal program. And so we did teach them about diet and nutrition and exercise, all of those things. It was a little bit different than how I practice now. We use the Ornish program. I don't know if anybody has ever heard of that, but it's a plant-based program, which is awesome. But like I said, it's a little bit different than how I practice now, but we changed some lives. So it was really awesome. So we did that. And then I realized at that time while I was managing that I wanted to be a provider and practice lifestyle medicine. So I went to school to be an NP. While I was doing that, I did a lot of home health, which I felt like was a really valuable part of my nursing career. That was kind of just a job I took because it was easy to manage school, my family, and work at the same time. But whenever you go into somebody's home and you're confronted with their barriers, you understand why patients can't follow the diet that you give them, or why they're not getting exercise, because these people's homes a lot of times it's just really eye-opening to see, like, oh, they can't even get to the grocery store. We're having to pull teeth to get a hold of a family member just to update. Like, of course, they're not going to go to the store and grab them things. And then financially as well. So it was really the missing piece to kind of understand. And you know that people have barriers, but I think seeing it with your own eyes, it really just put it into perspective how different people's situations are. But so I did home health then. And then whenever I graduated from NP school, I immediately took a hospitalist job, and I was the hospitalist in a critical access hospital. So it was a small rural hospital. And then I also did primary care for that hospital system as well. So I would function as a provider during the day. I remained on call for the hospital and was the admitting hospitalist for usually 1 to 2 weeks at a time with some time off.
Wow, that's a lot. And so then how were you able to pull yourself from that traditional path of working for other people to what you do now, which is working for yourself?
Yeah, so it was I always felt, outside of the time whenever I was working lifestyle medicine, I always felt like I was leading this double life. I was giving people all these medications. I was teaching them about things that I didn't really believe in. And then I would go home and practice my own life, and I would be eating in a completely different way. And I didn't really believe in a lot of these medications. And that takes a toll on you doing that for so long. And so
Yes.
it really took a toll on me as a provider, because as a nurse, I feel like I was just executing orders and I didn't have a lot of say. But once I was a provider and a nurse practitioner, and I was actually the one prescribing these medications that I didn't believe in, I didn't believe that giving this patient a statin was going to truly keep them from having a heart attack and make their life better. I needed an outlet. So I initially started Rebel Institute of Health as a side hustle, just an outlet for me mentally, because I felt like, okay, if I can provide these people what they need and teach them in a way that I believe in, I think I'll feel more fulfilled. And then that led to me doing it full time, because my husband, he took a job here in Frisco, so the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And it was just kind of the reality slap of, you know what, like I could just do this full time, because I was looking at other clinic jobs and I'm like, I wouldn't have any flexibility with my kids. I would be going back to do the same thing that I didn't want to do. I probably wouldn't have time to nurture my business in a new city, because where I lived previously, I had connections. So people were interested in what I was doing. But I was like, if I go somewhere where I know no one, I'm not going to have time to nurture this, and it's just going to go away. So I just dove right in. And so last summer, that was whenever we moved, I was like, okay, Rebel Institute of Health is my full-time passion, and that's what I'm going to do. And I have been so happy since.
It is really indescribable, just that freedom feeling. And I resonate so much with what you said about the double life. I wrote that down because I felt that when I was in corporate. I wasn't in healthcare, but similarly, where I just felt like the things that I was being asked to do in my day job were things that I didn't necessarily like believe in, think was right, agree with. And in some cases, as a people manager at these big companies, you had to follow the process in a lot of cases. And it just started to feel just so wrong. Like it wasn't who I was and it wasn't what I believed in. And that combined with what you said about like the wanting to be with the family and wanting to have the flexibility that allowed for that, it was like kind of everything was just like, I don't know, bubbling to the surface.
At traditional roles, no matter what field you're in my opinion, they do not support thinking outside of the box and not falling into this nice little package. They don't like you to stir the pot with like new ideas or way of doing things. They like for you to, just do things the way things have been done, keep your head down. And they don't really support flexibility and family time, which I think is really awful.
Yeah, well, and it's really hard mentally because a lot of these corporations are pumping messages about like innovation and work-life balance and taking care of yourself. They do it meaning well, like they're not saying those things, with ill intent. But in reality, what people are going through in the day-to-day, especially mothers, I think a lot of times they just feel like, oh, there's something wrong with me. Like, why am I not making this work? My company says that, I'm allowed to be innovative and I can influence, but like I can't, I keep hitting all of these walls. Or my company says that I should take time for myself, but I feel like I have no time for myself ever, barely even to like use the bathroom when I need to.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that actions speak louder than words. You can say that you're doing all of these things, but if you're not truly supporting, and I mean, men, I'm sure, feel this as well, but just speaking as a mother, I just don't feel like a lot of corporate is set up to support mothers, truly.
Yeah. Have you seen anything in your practice? I know you work a lot with like mothers and people that are kind of dealing with hormonal issues. Yeah. What are some of the patterns that you see with women that have come from this like go, go, go hustle culture?
Yeah, like I would say 90% of my female patients fall into this category, and most of them are spread so thin. They're almost like textbook. They all do the same thing. They're not eating and nourishing their bodies throughout the day. They're managing their kids and their kids' schedules, and they feel burnt out. They're not sleeping well. They're always sacrificing themselves and putting everybody else, their work and their family, in front of themselves. Which I understand. I mean, I even owning my own business, I can fall victim to that sometimes. I think it's just our nature of just being mothers. But I think that it's a very common thing that I see with this patient population of women that are just so burnt out and they don't see an outlet. We'll sit there and we'll speak about it and we'll talk about things that need to change. And they're like, I don't see how this could change. Like, these are my stressors. This is what I have going on. And it's like almost unfathomable to them to cut down on the stress.
Yes.
And to slow down.
Yes. I know. I can remember when my functional medicine provider was like, you've got to reduce or eliminate chronic stress. It said it like 4 times in her plan. And I'm like, I finally got to the point where I was like, how am I supposed to do that if I'm working in this full-time job? Like, I just don't think that that's even possible.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times it isn't. It isn't.
And what do you see on the health side of things, like in how all of this is impacting
Like,
women's
clinically,
health?
what do I see?
Yeah.
So I see their hormones are shot. I'm seeing low progesterone, younger and younger. That is usually one of the first hormonal imbalances that I see. Their insulin levels go up. Their cortisol levels are so wonky. They're not rising and falling the way that they should. Low DHEA, so that shows me that they're having adrenal fatigue, and their thyroids aren't functioning optimally either. So yeah, it takes a huge toll on the body. And then, we see these minute changes, and your primary care doctor may not see these things either. So you'll go to the doctor, they'll be like, oh yeah, you look good. But I hold my labs to like a very tight range. I've got my optimal range that I want them in. And so that's what I use to determine that these things aren't functioning properly, because, they're still functioning. So they're not going to flag in the traditional world yet. But in the health optimization world, they're flagging, and I'm noticing all of these trends.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of those things you mentioned, like progesterone, DHEA, insulin, those impact pregnancy and fertility,
Absolutely.
like the ability to get pregnant.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on just, it feels like this generation's massive struggles, like so many people I know are struggling to get pregnant, and they're struggling with secondary infertility.
Yeah. So I think that there's several big causes of that. One, I think, is just the general toxicity of the world. And, I'm not one of those people that gets overly caught up on toxins. I eliminate things in my home as much as I can, but I'm not going to be one of these people that's just like crazy making myself sick over trying to avoid toxins, because the reality is the air that we go out and breathe is full of toxins. We've got our cell phones up to our ears all the time. Everything's exposing us to radiation. So there's only so much of that you can control. You can do what you want to do within your home, but regardless, we're exposing ourselves and our young to those things. And I do think that has a big role. I think that chronic stress is playing a big role. I think that we're getting stressed out a lot earlier. I noticed this with my own child. And everything is like on steroids now. Like, he's a baseball player, and there's no just like having fun playing baseball. It's all competitive now. It's, you have to be on these select travel teams, and you have to push yourself. You have to have these trainers, and then school, you have to be the best. So I think that this chronic stress is starting so much earlier with this generation than what it has. I think it started early for us too, but I think we're going to start seeing more and more problems as this generation grows up. Because like I said, the stress is just starting so much sooner. And then I think that we're also stressed because it used to not be so common to have 2 working parents in the home and all of these things scheduled out. So I think our stress trickles down to them as well.
For sure.
But then also I think that synthetic hormones and birth control has a big role in infertility. I think that in the next few years, I think we're going to have that become more of a mainstream thought process. But right now, it's kind of taboo to talk about it. And then you're not supporting women if you say that. But I support women fully. I just do not trust synthetic birth control. I think that we hand it out too easily. If you get breakouts, here's some birth control. You have some cramps, here's some birth control. Oh, your periods are irregular, here's some birth control. We're not looking and figuring out, why are these things happening? What is going on? Is your gut out of balance? Do you have PCOS? I think now PCOS is a little bit more talked about, but I think a lot of people in our generation had PCOS type symptoms. And PCOS, that's really metabolic too. So a lot of times if you change the diet and you change the microbiome, you can get improvement in that. So we're not looking at the root causes, and we're just throwing this Band-Aid on it. And I think that all of those things together, I think, are leading to our infertility issues.
Yes. Yeah. It bothers me too how birth control was just passed out like candy. And like you said, it wasn't even for birth control. It was for acne and for irregular
Yeah.
periods and all of these other
No, and I
things.
cannot tell you how many women that I talk to, because, we go over what you're dealing with now, but we also look at like what happened whenever you first started your period. What were things like? And so many women are like, oh, I was on birth control, but I don't even remember why. Oh, I'm still on birth control, but I don't know why. I've been on it since I was 16. And so I just stayed on it outside of trying to get pregnant. And so, it's just, it's alarming how many people are on birth control and they don't even know why.
Yeah. So this goes perfectly into my next question, which is you are obviously very passionate about lifestyle changes over medicine as appropriate. What are some of your favorite or do you feel are the most powerful lifestyle hacks that people can make?
First and foremost, diet, hands down. I think that if you are having a clean, whole foods diet that's not high in like processed seed oils, I think that that is the best foundation that you can have. If you're eating real fruits, real vegetables, real meats. I think that minimizing and managing stress is huge as well. And, kind of going back to what we talked about before, especially as moms, stress is stress. Like you can't eliminate your kids being busy. You can slow down, but you can't eliminate those things. But you have to change the way that you process those things and the way that you handle those things. So if you're allowing yourself to get all worked up and all stressed and you don't have an outlet, then that's going to internalize and it's going to make things worse. But, if you're taking your time to meditate throughout the day, or you're getting on your vibration plate, or just sitting with some red light therapy or grounding, finding something that works for you, going for a walk. I mean, everybody's going to have something different that helps them decompress, but you have to find a way to decompress. But in general, I'm a big fan of keeping it simple. I mean, I've got patients that come to me more for like the biohacking type stuff, and I love to help them with that. That's fun. But that's not really how I practice personally in my life, and not the way that I practice with the most of my patients. I'm all about keeping things simple and about how they were intended to be. We were not intended to have processed foods. We weren't really even intended to have farmed foods. I mean, obviously we have to. We're not all just like living off the land. But so just going back to the way that we were meant to live. Move your body. Eat healthy food that came from the earth. If it grew in dirt or has a face, then it's okay for your body. And yeah, just slow down. And in lifestyle medicine, we have 5 pillars. So diet, exercise, stress management, building relationships, and sleep. And so I like to make sure that my patients are hitting all 5 of those things. So I want you sleeping. I want you putting energy into relationships, whether that's with your husband or with your kids or with your extended family or friends. You have to put your energy into that to grow those and feel nourished. And then, we've kind of talked about all the other things. So,
Yeah, I love that so much. I recently read or heard something that everything that you put in your body to give you life in terms of food, like once was life and it once was living. And it sounds so simple and so like a duh kind of moment. But when you really think about it like that, it is kind of profound.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So, as somebody with a scientific background, you had a lot of knowledge and resources at your disposal when your husband was going through his health crisis. That did not make it easy. You still had to do a ton of work and digging to figure out the answers that you wanted, or that you felt like were legit answers and not just Band-Aid answers. But what advice do you have for those of us who do not have a scientific background or a healthcare background, but we just are feeling unsatisfied and we don't want to settle? Like, how can just the average Joe be their own best advocate in the doctor's office when they're saying super rude and condescending things like, are you even the patient? Like, why are you talking to me?
Yeah, my number one advice is find a new provider. So if you don't have a provider that you can have conversation back and forth with, with, that they're not listening to your concerns and validating them or thoroughly explaining why it shouldn't be a concern. And not in a way that is dismissing you, but scientifically, this is the reason why. Like, I have patients that'll be concerned about like an outside lab value that was high or low, but it's not trending that way. And then other values I look at are in range. So I'm not concerned about that at that time. They need to take the time to explain that to you, not just be like, oh no, it's fine. You know, so my number one is find a provider that you trust and that you can work with. And then second is to be your own advocate, do your own research. Never just rely on what somebody has to say just because they're considered the authority on the subject. Do your own research, but be very careful with that. I love social media, but while it's a blessing, it's also a curse. I think that anybody and everyone is just trying to put anything out there to get noticed and to go viral and get followers. And so that information can't always be trusted. So I think you take that with a grain of salt, but do your own research. You know, if you see a video and you're like, oh, I'm kind of intrigued on how, you know, red light therapy could help my thyroid, and then go find some research on it that's from a reliable source. Go look and see if you can find any studies done on things. And you should be able to have a provider that you can ask these things to.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that you can find somebody that has done their own education and research on these things. So what I practice, none of this was learned in nurse practitioner school or nursing school or on the job. Everything was done on my own time with my own money to get this knowledge. So you want to find somebody that has educated themselves, because, you know, I have a lot of times that people will say, they'll ask their oncologist whether they can take NAD injections or something. And they're like, we advise against that because there's not enough research. Like, that's just their textbook answer. They don't want to be liable, and they don't know anything about NAD injections. So you want to find somebody that you can collaborate with so that you can feel like they're truly giving you an answer, not just concerned about their liability.
Yes. Oh, I had something similar happen to me, not with NAD, but a regular doctor being like, yeah, no supplements at all. And I was like, what? And I mean, I'm not just taking random supplements from Amazon, which is kind of what she was insinuating. It's like, I'm taking supplements recommended by people like you for specific things. So yeah, it's so disheartening sometimes, like those answers that we get.
It is. And I kind of got a reality slap. We spoke earlier. My mom had a major medical event, and they're in Oklahoma, I'm in Texas. And so a lot of it was being dealt with when I wasn't there. And so they're having conversations with the medical staff, and then they're relaying information to me. I'm like, that makes zero sense. But with the knowledge that I had, I was able to figure out what was going on and what they were saying. And it's just kind of a good reminder that for somebody like me, like, I have this background, so I'm able to navigate. But for somebody that isn't well-versed in this, it's really overwhelming. And you want to be able to trust who's in front of you at that point, because they're the knowledgeable one on your body and on health. And even though it's your body, you don't feel knowledgeable in those moments. So I think it's really important to just kind of remember what it's like for people that are having trouble navigating through these things, because it's really overwhelming.
One thing that has been really helpful for me is always getting my own labs, like saving the files to my computer. Whenever I have any sort of test done, I make sure that I get it like from the Quest website or from the doctor's office. And then I have a folder on my computer where all of that goes. And the reason that I do that, I started that probably 4 or 5 years ago, is because I had multiple instances of regular doctors after doing lab work being like, yep, everything's fine. And then had this horrific miscarriage. And after the fact, went back and looked at certain lab values and realized that no, there actually were some really big red flags that were not brought to my attention. I had never was sent those labs proactively. But then once I did my own digging and research, and like you said, and kind of connecting all of these puzzle pieces, I realized like, oh, there's actually a lot more to this story. And so now I just proactively request them all the time, even if they're not provided to me.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great plan, a great plan. And I see a lot of patients that have complex things going on, like MS and things like that. And so I want them to do some traditional medicine. I want them seeing a neurologist while they're working with me, but I want to see those labs that they're telling you are just fine, you know? So I request that from my patients too. I'm like, any lab work you get done with your specialist or anybody else, please let me put my eye on it so that I can make sure that I agree based off of everything that we're doing for you.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about starting and growing your business while being a mom? You have 3 children.
Mm-hmm.
I know you started this business relatively recently. So what does that look like for you in the day to day, just with like school and schedules and juggling all the things? I mean, you take client calls and these are about, you know, somebody's health. So I imagine you have to have some pretty good strategies regarding like kids barging in the room.
Yes. So my kids did so well this summer, outside of a few times. They understand mommy has to help people and mommy has to concentrate to help people. My kids are a little bit older though. I mean, my youngest is 5. My 11-year-old was able to help. But they are really understanding. My husband's really helpful too whenever he's home of, hey, mom's on a call, like you can't go in there. It's really hard to manage. I will say, I'm going to be honest, it's not all sunshine and rainbow. And, you know, I'm kind of struggling with that. Are you self-employed? Or are you an entrepreneur? I was listening to a podcast about that earlier. I'm definitely in the point of my life where I'm self-employed. I am the business. I'm taking on all the stress. I'm not delegating like I should. But I set boundaries for myself, and that's happened throughout time. I did not have boundaries in the beginning. And then my kids started making comments like, oh, you have time for your patients, but you don't have time for us. And that's like a knife in the gut, right?
Yeah.
And so then I had to be like, you know what? Like, you're right. It is after hours. That patient, nothing that they need right now is an emergency. I will get to them whenever I'm not with you. But it's nice. I'm able to set my schedule, like my work times, where I'm able to drop my kids off at school now and I'm able to pick them up. And whenever I was working as a hospitalist or even like a floor nurse, it wasn't like that. They were going to daycare. They were going to after school care. I'd pick them up from there. And my husband was the one that had to go get them from school if they were sick because I couldn't leave patients. So it's given me a lot of flexibility, but I've also given up some things too, you know? Your brain never shuts off when you're working for yourself and you have your own business. There's never time where I can just leave it. You know, it's always in the back of my mind of, oh, if I'm sitting here, I could be writing a newsletter to send to my patients, or I could be, you know, looking at labs right now instead of sitting here. And so I think that is definitely something that has been interesting to balance. But I think I'm a work in progress. I think we all are. I learn new things every day and new strategies every day. But I would say that setting boundaries is probably my biggest thing.
Yeah, that's super smart. And what does your husband do? I know you said he has some flexibility sometimes to pop in and help.
Yeah. So he is a controller for an oil and gas company. He is in accounting and finance. He's the money guy. I'm the health guy or girl, I guess. But yeah, so he does that. He had a lot of flexibility back whenever we were in West Texas. Now that he's in Dallas and we're in Frisco, it's a little bit harder for him to be as available. So that's another perk of me doing this. But he does work from home on Mondays and Fridays. So that is wonderful.
I love it on the days when the husbands work from home.
It makes the biggest difference.
It really does. He's always like, I'm so much more productive in the office. And I'm like, but we love having you here.
Right? Yes.
What are some fears or hesitations that crept into your journey, either in entrepreneurship or even in motherhood, as you think about what that journey looked like for you, and how have you overcome those?
Yeah, I mean, I still think I have those fears. We're very blessed that my husband has a job where we can rely on only his income. However, that's not something that we've done. I've always worked. I honestly have worked since I was 12. So it's like in me to work. And so taking that leap to do my own business, knowing that I was losing steady income and I was going to have to put money into growing my business, it was scary. And I still feel a lot of guilt. And he's the first one to shut me down and be like, no, it's fine. Like, this is what we're doing. Like, this is good. We're fine. But there's just always that guilt that you have. And I think also you always feel stretched thin, like you feel like you're not being the best mom. I could have given my patients quicker responses today. Maybe if I wasn't so stressed with my clinic, I wouldn't have been so short with my child. Like there's always that guilt all around. And so I think that's another big barrier as well.
Yeah, for sure. So tell us about the Rebel Institute and how people can find you.
Yes. So I practice integrative medicine. That's what I like to call it. So I primarily do root cause medicine, functional type medicine, but I also use traditional medicine things when needed. So, if you have a strep infection, I'll give you some antibiotics, but whenever I give you those antibiotics, we're also going to support your gut so that we're not wrecking your microbiome and causing a bigger issue in the long run. So yeah, that's kind of where it comes into play, where I'm using both things. Like I said, I do, focus on health optimization. So that looks different for everyone. Some people come to me really healthy and they're just like, okay, what peptides can I use to enhance my healing in the gym, and how can I make things even better? And then I do have patients with medical conditions like, autoimmune conditions. Hashimoto's is really big. I do a lot of that. MS, all sorts of things like that. And so we work to manage those naturally. And like I said, I do work along with their specialists. So a lot of times people think that functional medicine is all or nothing, that you either have to choose the natural route or choose the traditional route. And I just don't believe that that's the case. I think that a lot of times all the time functional medicine is needed, and a lot of times traditional medicine is needed in some capacity. Because not everything is lifestyle based. Some things are genetic, some things have other things going on, So, and I work with balancing hormones. I help women going through perimenopause and menopause with weight loss. That's a really big one. Kind of going back to that question you asked me about what I see with the ones that are burnt out. A lot of it is weight that they can't get off. And we look at it, it's like, well, they're doing these HIIT workouts that are just completely blowing their cortisol because they're doing them fasted, and they're doing them with energy drinks or with coffee afterwards to get through the day, and they're not eating for like 5 or 6 more hours. And so we take a deep dive and look at like your full lifestyle. And it's not just, we think about weight loss and we're like, okay, calories in, calories out. How can we get you to lose weight? But there's just so much more that goes into it. So we're looking at insulin, we're looking at thyroid, we're looking at cortisol, we're looking at all the things to figure out what the actual cause is.
That's amazing. Well, and you are such a valuable resource, because I have been in the shoes of like working with a functional medicine person over here and still seeing a traditional OB or whatever the situation is. And it becomes really hard as the patient when you don't have that medical background sometimes, when you're in the middle and like this one's saying to do this and this one's saying don't, or, you're getting like, I've been in multiple situations where I've gotten completely conflicting direction. Mm-hmm. And then I'm the one that's like trying to figure out what should I do, which I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I mean, I think we should all be empowered, and like we do know our bodies best. But I think with you, like really respecting and practicing both models and being able to be that single source of truth for your patients has to be immensely helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of biased, but I think that integrative is kind of the way to go, because yes, I can see things through both lenses, and I'm really educated in that traditional medicine route, even though I don't practice it in the traditional way. I think it's important too, and we don't talk about this a lot in the functional medicine world, but it's important to have that traditional background so that you can notice when things aren't right. Because not everything is mold and Lyme, and sometimes there's some really serious things going on that need to be caught and evaluated and treated in a different manner. And so I think it helps to kind of have both hats.
If somebody has gone to nursing school, let's just say, that's listening to this, and they are also starting to feel frustrated and wanting to go a different route, and like you said, educate themselves and find kind of different resources, what can they do? Like, how did you start out when you were trying to figure out the different path?
Yeah, so it started out with me talking with like-minded practitioners. So it was good to have that that outlet, and we could bounce things off of one another. And then I got into podcasts. I started listening to those. And then once I started getting more serious that's whenever I looked at like formal education. So the Institute for Functional Medicine has wonderful programs. There's a School of Applied Functional Medicine. They're great as well. So there's a lot of formal programs that you can do for functional medicine. And there's so many resources with these different companies like Rupa, the people that do GI map, like they're always offering further continuing education classes as well. You do have to seek out your own education whenever it comes to this stuff. But I would suggest that if you're wanting to start the more free route, get into listening to some podcasts and find a practitioner that functions in that or that practices that way, and kind of bounce ideas off of them and pick their brain. If anybody wants to reach out to me, I am more than happy. I love talking functional medicine, health, all things. And so, yeah, I'm happy to chat.
Awesome. And can you see patients in all states?
Only Texas, unfortunately. I wish I could do all states, but just
Okay. Well, Texas is a pretty big state,
It's a pretty big
I'm sure a lot of the listeners will be from Texas. I have one final question for you, and this one's kind of a fun one, but how did you decide on your business name, Rebel Institute?
So originally, back whenever it was just my side hustle, I was just going to be Jillian Tate Wellness. So I was like, oh, I'll keep it simple. People recognize my name because I was in a small area. And then whenever I found out we were moving here, I was like, well, I can't be Jillian Tate Wellness. Nobody knows me. Like, it doesn't matter to them. And so I was like, I need like a real business name. And so I came up with Rebel because I was like, I want people to be rebels in like healthcare and like push the envelope and not just like fall into this nice package box and listen to the traditional way of doing things. I want them to rebel and, take charge of their own health and their own life and do their own research. And I felt like I was a little bit of a rebel by going this route. And so, yeah, that's how Rebel Institute of Health came about.
I love it. Well, I will definitely put a link to your website in the show notes so that people can find you. I'm sure lots of people are going to be interested after hearing you and just hearing all of your passion and all of your boldness around health, which is one of the most important things in all of our lives. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.